Hello, today's December 26, 2020, and welcome to another episode of Life with Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Mike.
All right, let's go with the first question here. So we're about on page 500 in your book now, and you talk about a chic bar. Can you tell us about some of the various businesses that you've had over your lifetime?
Well, we had a bar
Yeah,
that failed.
yeah,
We had group sessions, different facilities in Chicago and New York. We had telephone centers in New York and North Carolina. We owned a Haagen-Dazs. And what else am I missing? Oh, we opened a company called CLT, which was a derivative of our own company. And we just thought there was a niche there and it worked out very well.
huh,
And aside from that, I mean, we had, as I think I mentioned, um, we had different branches in 6 or 7 cities. You know, they worked within their capacity within the branch. And some of those were Chicago and Albany because it was near one guy's parents, Kansas City, Orlando. Um, I'm missing, Westchester County. So, but they were all part of the business scheme and the business,
yeah,
it wasn't just automatic and it wasn't caprice, it was planned.
yeah. But what
If I
was
were younger,
yeah,
I would have done a lot more with the branches were very effective. Uh, the telephone centers were very effective, made money. Okay.
what was the bar then? I mean, that seemed really outside kind of
What was the bar?
yeah,
Ego.
ego. Okay.
Yeah. Several of us said, we can open a bar on the east side and it's very chic
Yeah.
and it's not hard but it what proved hard and didn't work out.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I mean, we also did things in investments. We had, stocks and bonds and
Sure.
things like that. And yeah.
Okay. So I want to go back a little bit. You talk about in the late 1970s, there was a recession. Um, but what was it in you and Joe that not only survived, but then really grew your business?
Well, there was a bad recession in the 70s and the late 80s,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. I think first of all, you got to face the fact that it's a bad recession and you're part of it. And there could be some bad moments. Clients can cut back on budget, um, and really did. Some people within the company were ineffective, and we decided we had to part ways. But you fight for survival, and in fighting for survival, you do different things. For instance, in those days, there were different pricing in airlines, not within an airline. If you flew at 11, it was cheaper than if you flew at 9.
Yeah.
So we cut back on all kinds of costs, and that proved effective. And we really pushed people hard, including ourselves, in terms of contact, in terms of new ideas, in terms of we could do this faster, more effectively, better quality. And then you had your friends who were clients, and and if they could, they would steer a job to you. And so like any business, in fact, like the businesses during the virus, current virus, some people are going under and some people are going to survive. And,
Yeah.
you do what you can.
Yeah.
And for instance, one last thing, I didn't take any salary for about 6, 7 months and lived on our savings. Joe had, the baby and all of that, and he couldn't quite do that, but he could keep within.
Yeah.
That helped.
Yeah. Not an easy thing. Um, so I want you to talk a little bit about Pacific market research, and how do you feel, with your two sons going into the market research business?
I didn't know they weren't going to go into the market research business, but Mark is a lawyer.
Yeah.
Andrew was just going around. He hadn't decided what he wanted to do. He was about 28. And at that time, telephone centers, you could handle telephone centers. You didn't have to be a great analytical genius. The different facets were straightforward, and the business was roaring. And so Mark called me and said he wants to open a firm, and he did. And I didn't know my role, but our people knew him very well. And so they helped him get going. And it was much appreciated on my part. They really taught him, what they would need. And it was broad. He went and he met other people and, got it going. And then about a certain period of time elapsed, and he went and formed a Latino division, which was successful.
Yeah, but what was your feeling about, them doing that? I mean, was it
About what?
about them actually going into market research, doing what you had done?
Well, he went to law school and he did well. And I think I mentioned perhaps earlier, he would have been a good lawyer.
Yeah.
My lawyer, he worked for my lawyer for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then went out to the coast. But my lawyer said that he was bright.
Yeah.
And he was thorough and all of that. And he would have been a good lawyer. But for whatever reason, he wanted to locate in Seattle, whether it was me or wanting to be independent or on his own or whatever. And Andrew went out to help him get going the first few weeks, months, and then stayed around. So the two of them became full partners.
Okay. There's a quote in the book from you.
Yeah.
I want to read it and get and I want to know what you mean by it. You say, yet humankind is always looking for some form of idealism, which unfortunately always has within it the seeds of its own destruction. The dream seems genetically wired in. So what did you mean by this? Do you remember that quote?
No.
Okay.
Well, just give me the first lead in again, and maybe.
Yeah, sure. And it will jog your memory. Yet humankind is always looking for some kind of idealism, which unfortunately always has within it the seeds of its own destruction.
Yeah, I think what I was saying was that people want to be good.
Yeah.
They want to not only succeed, but they want others to succeed. and it's not a simple matter, and probably results in losing out. But I think the moral is there.
Yeah.
I think the feeling of, you want to work hard, you have to earn it, but beyond that, you move into the morality and society, and you want to contribute. You want to be really a positive force, but you can't always succeed. I don't know if that's exactly what you meant, but
Yes.
I always felt that I wanted to do something positive for society, and because I had been blessed with so many good things, and I wanted to give back.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So let's move on. Can you talk about so the Rosenbergs
Yeah.
and the talks that you attended, where you actually engaged with Ronald Radosh. What did all of that bring up for you?
Well, I think that there's part of society that really provides an opportunity, and somehow Jews took advantage of it. But a lot of parts of the society could not and did not. And so if therefore someone were to describe me, I think they'd say I was the leftist.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't believe in the communist facet of it,
Yeah.
but I admired a lot of them. It's like, I'm trying to think of who the quote, oh, no, I'll come across it. But there's a quote of, it wasn't Kessler. In any event, it was, I admired the people who made the revolution, but not what the revolution stood for.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very good description of me. It's like, I really admired all of these people who made something in the Soviet Union and in the United States and all. But I didn't know the people were really singular and extended themselves. They were terrific. But some of the things they were defending were not. And, within that context, as far as, well, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no. So talk a little bit, about the Rosenbergs and Radosh.
Yeah. Well, you have to know that in terms of the Rosenbergs, they were communists. Starting in the 30s, they were of that age,
Yeah.
and all. And Julius was married Ethel, and Ethel, Julius was like not a mechanic, but worked with machinery and all. Ethel was just a stay-at-home wife. And they believed in not only in communism, but in a better world, if you will. And so they didn't see anything wrong with spying, you see.
Yeah.
I'm want to get it straight. In any event, what I've been searching for is the Soviets were our allies, and if in fact we turned over something to them, it would help their war effort, which would help our war effort. And that's not quite. I think that was their belief, but they believed in the Soviet Union first. And most leftists are not comfortable with praising the United States. I have that in the book too. Somehow, they can't come up with a vocabulary that says, the United States has some great, great benefits. It's provided opportunity, etc.
Yeah.
In any event, Ethel's brother um, got a job in Los Alamos in the far west, I guess in Arizona.
Yeah.
And he was contacted by Julius, but by a number of other people, and to see if they could get some insight, something about this new weapon, the atomic bomb. Ultimately, Julius's contribution was minimal or nothing. His brother-in-law actually made a contribution, but in terms of some other products. I don't want to prolong it, but the point was that Ethel and Julius were scapegoats. The government saw if tried to put a lot of pressure on Ethel to make Julius confess, and he was guilty, and he did spy, but it wasn't of not much value. The brother-in-law, as I said, had more value, but he made a deal with the feds because he wanted to save his wife from prison,
Yeah.
and etc. The Rosenbergs wouldn't make that deal. There is something also about anti-Semitism there, and that's notably that the judge was Jewish, the prosecutor was Jewish.
Yeah.
All of the people involved were Jewish.
Yeah.
And Communist Party wasn't only Jewish. It was was something I think I mentioned to you in the Spanish Civil War. About half of the volunteers who went to Spain were Jewish.
Yes.
So getting back to the Rosenbergs, they had poor counsel up until the end. Their lawyers were not the most effective, and that's a shame. And I don't think, Trump is allowing some people to be, electrocuted now.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the Rosenbergs, if they were tried today, would be sentenced to death. Maybe life imprisonment, maybe 30 years. But as it turns out, they were not the spies that we thought. Now, the spies that really made a difference were in England. And there was a group there that actually, were able to break in, get the material and pass it on to the Russians. And they were really, really spies. The ones here were not. There were American spies, but in the Rosenberg case, not. And so for me, I really felt, I wanted to be useful, and I was always leaning towards the left, but not enough to come close to spying or being with the Rosenbergs, etc. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But you heard Ron Radosh speak a few times.
Yes, very much.
And you described that in the book. Do you remember those talks?
Yeah, I remember where I was even sitting in Carnegie Hall. No. Orchestra side. No, Ron Radish was a historian along with his wife.
Yeah.
They were leftists. And they wrote a book defending the Rosenbergs. Subsequently, they wrote another book in which they said that the Rosenbergs, specifically, Julius was guilty. And then he died, and she kept going. She was a historian. And as far as the meeting was, it was a meeting where the communists rolled out, this was at Carnegie Hall, their best and brightest and smartest people. and they made their presentation, and it was effective. And Radish came on and refuted most of what they said. He was an ex, I don't remember if he was an ex-communist or not. He probably was. But the key point was that he first did the research and then he did the subsequent research. He was allowed to speak. And he came out with some damning evidence. And he was one of the two people who made that statement about the communists, the leftists could not find a way of praising the US, you know? And that hurt them badly.
Yeah.
You know, they couldn't be in swing with the party. And even during World War II, there were a lot of people who didn't want to help Russia. Not that they weren't for the invasion and et cetera, but they weren't for Russia. They still were anti-Soviet.
You know, I read in today's Times, there was an article about a guy named George Blake, who he was a British spy who betrayed the West. He died at 98, but he was imprisoned, but then he escaped and he ended up living the rest of his life in Russia. And but that's exactly what, go ahead.
It's interesting, you know, Ethel and Rosenberg, several of their ring, if you will, if you can describe it that way, fled to Mexico.
They did.
You know, because they were afraid they would be, because they were part of the group.
Yeah.
They were going to be caught.
Yeah.
And so they did, much like perhaps your guy. And then, you know, there are, I mean, the guy Le Carre who died the other day and wrote different things. You know, in his book, his first book, what he said was, I had to make a choice between a society that I thought was corrupt, et cetera, and another society that at least was for the poor. And something like that. Yeah, people fled because, you know, one guy who was the closest to Rosenberg actually finished his term. It was either 20 years or 30 years. And he was released from prison. And that's why I think the Rosenbergs never would have been electrocuted. I think they would have been given a stiff, long sentence.
Yeah.
But that's all. And maybe with the new evidence, Ethel might have been released even earlier. Who knows?
Well, she wasn't guilty, right?
She wasn't guilty.
But
and her two sons,
yeah,
who were adopted by
Maripol, right?
Yeah, never stopped fighting.
Yeah.
And I think they might have been able to get her freed.
Yeah.
Not him easily, her more easy.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go back a little bit, talk about your business. You talk about, I mean, much later on in the book, the road not taken as part of running the business. And what do you think might have happened if you would have taken more risk in the business? Not saying that you didn't, but you talked about a couple of times, like you talked about, I think, the whole international division piece, and you didn't.
Well, that was easy. We should have seen that there was a room for a national. Now, subsequently, we did work in Japan and China, and but we were early, and that could have been more dramatic, more possibilities. Japan was really coming on, and if we could have been their spokesman and done research, that would have really helped us, helped them. But we did hire a president of the company, and she was terrific. And she wanted to make some major changes, and most of our seniors fought her and were against her, and I guess we took it as you just said, the road not taken. I think she would have made us a bigger firm. But what we had was safe within a degree. I mean, we had a certain amount of clients, and we had some good techniques and some procedures, and we would have just continued. And here she was saying, and it was admirable. She said, let the whole staff of seniors go. She said, I'll write all the reports. She said, don't worry about. Now, that gives you an indication of her confidence, but also an indication of her ability. She wasn't worried about that. She felt that, and not all of the seniors wouldn't have left in any event. I mean, they have to make a living, and they have to,
Right.
But it didn't work, and it's a shame. Not a shame, that's the wrong word. It might have been something that if we had taken the chance, went along with her, she could have brought other people in too. There's always a market for smart and well-versed people. And she came in and she said, it's not working because you're still going with the old ways. And it was a mistake. One of many that we made down through the years.
Of course.
We could have, or certainly we could have opened up more things. We could have had more, or we would have had more offices. That's a given. But we could have opened more telephone centers and group facilities. And so we could have broadened the firm. I don't think much about it, but when I do, I say to myself, we could have done this and this, but you can't, frankly, not sour grapes, but you can't regret.
Yeah.
What we did was what we did, and
Right.
it was a safe harbor to a degree.
Yeah. So this was that you mentioned the initials LS. This was LS in your book. LS is the person that you mentioned.
Oh, well, yeah.
LS. So was it more about, so it was wanting to be safer? I'm just going to probe a little bit. Wanting to be safer. I mean, you had, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We were a fairly large sized business.
Yeah.
We were in very good shape. We were well situated in terms of the future.
Yeah.
And this LS was a senior who was running a division. And at some point he wanted to run his own division, and so he bought out the company. And then we had MS, who was the same thing. Maybe I'm missing your point, but I just didn't want to mention his name.
Yeah, no.
For that, but sometimes you don't know the animosity, or you don't know certain situations. They bought us out. They started their own company. It was he and a woman. She's like the other one, very bright, very smart, very effective. And they started their business, and they seemed to do well. And then a friend of mine said he had had lunch with LS, and LS said it's only a matter of time till we pass data, and you know, and they're not going anywhere, et cetera, et cetera. And it bothered me because, you know, the animosity of them breaking away disappeared over time. But to hear him still talking and wish us badly, because that's what he was saying, eventually, essentially, they were going to grow and we were going to, you know, fade away. And ultimately, they did fail. They sold the business to an ad agency, and when they and they didn't do well. And when they closed the place, they had 4 seniors, and we had 42.
Oh,
Now, I think I may have told you that before. In other words, we didn't disappear.
yeah.
We kept adding. And when I say 42, we had probably 12, 14 real seniors. They, you know, they were, and maybe 50 of, you know, from senior to junior.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of professionals, and that didn't count, as an example, our multivariate and statistical work, and we had people there. And it didn't count our computer work. We had people there. So we had a fairly large firm.
So even with, you know, when we think about the road less taken, you still had this incredible business, which continues, right, to this day. I mean, it's
Right.
still going strong, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's about 50% bigger than when we sold it, which
wow.
is, no, that's not a lot. You're impressed. The way things have developed, I would have thought that they would have had triple.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, because of the international,
Yeah.
uh, as one real example, the
Yeah.
international, I think they could have had 15 offices. Um, I think they could, in other words, and I think they could have brought in some very smart people. And we were one of the leaders in statistical work. We had a great gal who really knew her stuff, but she could have had 5 people. She was also a very good presenter.
Yeah.
So we didn't capitalize initially. Not much time had passed, but there were many ways. For instance, Andrew and Mark are talking about a technique they want to push. I don't think it's a good idea, but they may pull it off. Who knows? There are things to be done. For instance, we didn't do much work with the government.
Yeah.
And Mark and Andrew do a lot.
Yes.
So maybe we would have been doing a lot of government work.
Yeah.
So I was surprised. I would have thought that they would have grown decidedly more. But again, they may have not, because they wanted it to be solid and safe.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah. During your time, so I mean, you met a lot of really interesting people, of course, in the business, but you noted in the book that you met August Bush.
Yeah,
Do you remember that at all? What were your impressions?
as like it was yesterday.
What were your impressions of him then?
Well, you have to know what he wanted to do. Excuse me. His grandfather founded, or the firm,
Yeah.
and that's Budweiser.
Yeah.
August Bush, and the firm. I mean, they were so successful, and his role now. He was the chairman of the board or whatever. His role now, as he saw it, because he explained it to me, and I'll tell you in a moment. He felt that he had a lot of good managers, plus his sons and his grandsons, and they were running Budweiser very well, and Bud was #1 and all of that. What he wanted to do was to make sure that they would protect Budweiser. And by that he meant they wouldn't do anything foolish just because, to grow, as an example. And a good example of that is he felt whiskey had not handled itself. And so there was a lot less drinking, and cigarettes, a lot less smoking. And he didn't want people not to drink beer, in plain terms.
Huh.
So his role was that of protecting the company much more than profits or today's sales or anything. And we had a new guy join us, and he said, August Bush wants to meet the chairman. So I said, okay. So he said he wants to see that we're on the same path, and he wants to explain what he's about. So I said, okay. So I took, and they wouldn't give us work, and we were getting a lot of work from Anheuser, unless he approved.
Yeah.
So obviously I wanted to go. This new guy said, just be straight, that's all, and go.
Yeah.
And so I went to St. Louis, went to his offices which as I remember it, were enormous. And, with an enormous desk and all of that. He gave me this spiel about protecting beer. That was his whole mission. Not cigarettes, not cigars, not liquor, not whatever, any of that. And we talked for about an hour. And he said, you're my guy. You'll do studies just for me. And I said, okay. And I didn't want to say, how about the rest of the company? It would have been out of,
Right.
And we continued anyway.
Yeah.
And so along with this guy who joined us and myself, we did studies like, I'm forgetting the studies, but basically the horses going through the thing.
Yeah.
All kinds of slogans. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the slogans, but the slogans were essentially, beer is good.
Right.
And it's part of the American whatever, and all. And you'd recognize the commercials immediately. And we did every once in a while. And the second thing we did was we measured beer importance, not beer taste, which the other guys were doing.
Yeah.
But we measured drinking, people thinking about drinking beer. And it was very successful. He was very pleased. And then he died. He was older. And the family who he was protecting sold the company to a Dutch company. He's rotating in his grave, because here he was doing, his whole life was dedicated to saving beer.
Yeah.
And they sold him out. Why? It's beyond belief. They all had money, of course, and they all had, and lots of it. And if it was managed properly, none of them would ever again know for want.
Yeah.
Right. And one guy didn't want to go into beer. He wanted to do this. Another one, divorce or whatever the reasons were. And they had reasons of their own. They sold it. And it's not an American company anymore.
Right.
You wouldn't know that, but it's not. It's a Dutch company.
Huh.
And it was terrible.
Yeah.
Sure, I made less money when he was gone, but it was a lot of money.
Yeah. But you like the guy. I mean,
Yeah, he was okay. I mean, most of our conversations were, were about beer
right.
and about the latest study and how we're doing. Are we moving up? And the commercial is so, it's on the tip of my tongue. The commercial is so, what do you call it? So common, you'd know it in a moment, but I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll look it up afterwards.
Okay. You'll tell me. All right. Okay. I wanted you had mentioned Isaac Kessler in your book. Can you,
Yeah.
can you tell me more about Isaac and what he meant to your life?
Well, he was probably Dad's favorite husband. Husband. See, that's age. Dad's favorite friend, and they would go out together with their wives. He was a furrier, and that was a big industry in that time, in those times, in terms of, if you will, the garment center, which was so important to the city's welfare. And my mother died, and we were at the funeral home, and he said something to the effect of, "Have you looked into the coffin?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You got to look into the coffin." I said, "I don't want to." So he picked me up. He was a big, strong guy. I was 7 years old. And he carried me over to the coffin. He put my face right almost against the screen. And he said, "This is your mother. You're never going to see her again." And that was it. Then it was a funeral home, etc. But so you think he's a monster, or you think you got to think about him, why he did it. It could be a custom from Europe. It was an open coffin, obviously, to
Yeah.
see her. But no. But on the other hand, he was a baseball fanatic, and my father didn't know from baseball.
Yeah.
So Isaac took me. I don't know why not Norman. But Isaac took me to ball games, the Yankees, and that's how I became a Yankee fan for the rest of my life. And he said to me, and we were in a box. What is it? A box seat. And he said, "You can watch a game two ways." I don't know if I told you this, but you can watch a game two ways. The first way is you watch the batter. He swings, he gets a hit, he doesn't, he gets a double. He said, that's how most people watch the game. They watch the batter and the pitcher. He said, but you can do better than that and get more enjoyment out of that. He said, when a guy hits a single or a double, watch what the rest of the guys are doing. He said, are they moving into a position so that if the outfielder throws the ball, the ball can be relayed to home and you might get it an out. He said, does the catcher back up the first baseman? And he taught me to watch a game from many angles. And when I go to a game, that's what I do. I watch the second baseman or the third baseman with a bunt or whatever. Now, I also watch the game.
Right.
I mean, you go for the game. But I really appreciated his advice because it's equally true in football and basketball. Somebody's cutting. If they don't cut, they don't get the ball.
Right.
You know what I mean? You still can watch the guy shoot, but to watch a guy cut or block somebody is really terrific. And so I tried to instill that in Mark.
Yeah.
And Andrew doesn't care about it,
No.
but in Mark,
Yeah.
and that's how I think he watches games too.
So how were you? So he was the first one to take you to a baseball game then, Isaac?
Yeah.
And how old do you think you were? 9, 10 maybe, or?
or 8.
or even younger.
Yeah.
Do you have any recollection of who you actually saw play at all, or?
Well, as I said, I was a Yankee player. No,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't remember which team,
yeah.
but I would suspect it was probably in Easton. They play more often, and they didn't have as many teams.
But I
So
mean,
they haven't.
which players? Do you remember the players that you saw in the Yankees?
Well, let's
Maggio,
see.
you must have seen, huh?
Yeah, um, I really think I saw DiMaggio
Must.
and Keller,
Yeah.
and there were, probably saw Rizzuto.
Yes.
These are guys who were still playing after the 40s. Um, and the manager McCarthy, and then subsequent. I mean, whoever the Yankees were playing in those days, Dom DiMaggio was playing against them. That was Joe DiMaggio's brother. He played center field just like Joe. Um, I also, and here I was a little later, went to the PAL, Pacific Athletic League, was they would give out tickets for the Yankee games, and yeah, and so a lot of us would go to the games. You take a bus and then a train, you know, things like that.
Let's see. I'm just looking up some of the guys. Yeah, DiMaggio was 46, and Rizzuto, Tommy Henrik, Charlie Keller,
Tommy Henrik was, old, reliable.
Yogi. Saw
Yeah,
Yogi.
Rivera was playing, but he was more at the beginning. The second baseman was the second baseman. He went into the army. Uh, yeah, I think you saw Ted Williams, who was
Yeah.
perhaps the best hitter of all times.
Wow. And how did Isaac become interested? I mean, he
How
came.
did
How did Isaac become interested in baseball? Was he born in the U.S. or no?
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. He, you know, maybe that was his way of being an American. Maybe not. He Another thing was that um, he was a liberal, and he would talk to me about the Liberal Party. He was an official, but he was also, as I said, a furrier, and he hated the communists, and he really was against them. And he occasionally would talk to me about it. Maybe, maybe that influenced me, maybe not.
So continuing to talk about people. Bob Cooperman, Saul, Joe, obviously, they were your best male friends.
Yes,
Bob's still alive. Can you
he's
talk?
not in good shape, but he's still alive.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, as we age, obviously,
Right. That's a
that-
very good point.
that's that. And so, can you talk a little bit more about what these people have meant in your life? I mean, to you personally.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking about them lately, and
Yeah.
it really affects me because when you talk of Bob Koopman, I met him on the first day of when I joined Baruch. He was online, I was online to get into the school.
Uh-oh.
When we kept the friendship up, when we started the business, he was our accountant. We didn't have a lawyer. We didn't need a lawyer. And so we stayed friendly since 49. So you're
Wow.
talking 70 years.
Wow.
And we would go out our wives and all of that. And then he went to school at night, Columbia, became a lawyer. When you're talking of Saul, when we opened the business, we had an accountant, but he wasn't effective. And I called Saul, and what Saul did, and I think I told you in earlier years, was when you start a business, you don't have any cash to boot,
Yeah.
basically, cash flow. And when you build now, but you owe people who did the work, whether it was an office or whatever. So we didn't have any money. And so I called Saul, should have called him initially. And he went into the bank and got us a $5,000 loan. And, if you're talking of 1949, you're talking of $5,000 is probably equivalent of 50, 70. So we could pay people. And if we can pay people, they wanted to do business with you. They didn't want to wait forever. And Saul became really a very close friend. Now, he was both a business advisor, but also he got us into some, later on, to some ventures. For instance, we got into orange futures. That's buying oranges and then selling them, or selling them and then buying.
Yeah.
That's what futures are about. And he got us into some other things. And, he recommended some people to us, not in research, but in business. And he gave me advice forever. And he was a good guy. And so I really appreciated what he offered, and really feel it terribly. Bob Koopman gave advice. He was a terrific negotiator, incredible. He would, when everybody around the table, and we bought, sold companies, made their point and were angry or this or that, he would very carefully and quietly start summarizing it. He would talk slowly and low and in a low voice. And he would, I think I may have told you this, he made it sound like their position was terrific, as if he was part of their team. But then he suddenly turned things around, and it was to our great benefit. So he, as I say, and we would win literally all of the cases.
Huh.
I must say that he was a terrific negotiator. So you said Saul and Bob and who else?
And Joe, of course.
And Joe.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, did you say Joe?
Yes.
Yeah. He was a guy who I always knew had my back. And I was not reckless, but I was venturesome. And he would put a halt on it sometimes, or he would back me up one way or another. And we were a good team. And he, I think we were able to work together very well. And we were good friends, and stayed friends till the very end.
And the four of you used to get together? Sal, Bob, Joe, and you?
Yeah, definitely. And the four of us, Lynn, Sheila,
Wives.
yeah, and myself. Oh yeah, we went out.
Yeah.
And with Joe, now also with Bob, we went on many vacations. I would bet with Joe and Lynn and Sheila and I, we went on 7, 8, 10 vacations together, maybe more. We went to Spain. We went twice to Mexico. We went to Italy twice, maybe. Ireland, Scotland, we went to Japan. So you can see we went together in a lot of places. And then later in life, less so. But that's, He would go see his kids, I would go see my kids. As far as meeting with Saul and Bob, if I spoke to him twice a week, which I would, and Saul, both. And if you're talking of 50 weeks, and and I talked to him daily, probably spoke to him 1,000 times. And the same with Saul, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because, there are all kinds of issues.
And you went with Bob to Israel, right?
Bob and I went to Israel. And it was a good trip with UJA or something. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can still remember that trip too. I remember we stayed at the King David Hotel, which was the hotel. And they had a pool and we'd go swimming. And within a few minutes, he was on the other side and I was still swimming. He was a terrific athlete.
Huh.
Well,
Huh. Yeah, you've been very fortunate to have such really good male friends in your life.
great advisors.
Yeah.
Alan was a different. He was, he was engrossed in his business with Dad, and Norman was out on the coast working for them. So these guys were like my family,
Yeah,
and they were my family.
that's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to talk more about Alan next time.
Oh, okay.
But the hour has gone. I still have about half a page of questions left for you.
You're kidding.
Kidding. Your book brought up a lot of questions for me. So you're answering them, and I appreciate it.
If you turn it off, let me bring you up to date.